Welcome everybody to the LGBTQ Chiefs Forum for 2021. I'm Assistant Chief Beatrice Girmala, and I'm the Director of the Office of Operations, which oversees the 21 geographic areas of the Los Angeles Police Department, but I also have the privilege, and I underscore the word privilege, to be the Chief's liaison to the LGBTQ community. So to all of our beautiful community members here representing all parts of the city of Los Angeles, thank you for bringing us to a day like today on the rooftop, the Chief's Terrace, to celebrate Pride Month. And we couldn't be more proud of what you have taught us, where you have brought us, and what the relationship looks like today. Yet, we have a long way to go. We're all in. We have a lot of energetic new command officers who are here today to meet and greet you, to learn, and to see what the community is all about, and to see and celebrate with you the community as we know it in the city of Los Angeles. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I'm not going to keep my remarks too long, just a few things I'd like to say. Last Tuesday, we were very fortunate to have the Board of Police Commissioners ask for a check-in with the department and our relationship with the LGBTQ community. And I was joined with esteemed colleagues, Karina Samala. Karina, please stand to be recognized. My esteemed professor, Mother Karina. Let's hear it from Mother Karina. And I call them my professors because the truth has to be told up here. I mean, we're in front of God and everyone, so I have to tell the truth. Where's James Wen? James, another professor of mine. And I don't see here today, I'm not sure if joining us virtually, Jasmine Creighton and Mariana Marroquin. I just want to share something from my heart with each and every one of you. We've known each other, some of us going on 14, 15 years, like Mother Karina and myself, and some of us the last 5 or 6 years with the LGBTQ working group. And what I'm so proud to say is the working group really puts in work and really creates product. And it's product that not only benefits the LGBTQ community, but it is all inclusive. It helps every single component, every single member of the city of Los Angeles by its loving and caring initiatives. So I just want to say thank you for opening people's eyes, opening people's hearts and souls as well. I just also want to recognize some of our great partners here today. We have Capri Maddox from the Civil and Human Rights Department. Somebody who has bailed me out of trouble and problems more times than I could ever count. If I had a brother, I wish he would be just like him, Francisco Ortega. And a shout out to Channel 35. Today is something very special. Channel 35, let's hear it for them. They're the city channel. And when we asked if they would partner with us here today, they were all in. They changed their hours. They've been here 2 days to try to set up for this event so it could be all inclusive for those maybe still suffering with COVID, maybe unable due to work or other issues to be here in person. But just so you know, we have many people out in our community watching us virtually. So we've really expanded the reach. We also have 6 media outlets who are gracious enough. Thank you, Megan Aguilar from our media relations section and her team. Megan helped make that happen. So members of the general public who may not be well versed in the accomplishments and contributions of the LGBTQ community can see it firsthand. So Megan, I appreciate it so much. To the public engagement section, and all the folks who are here today, Billy Brockway, Curtis McIntyre, Donnie Graham as you're changing seats, Julie Noni, Jules Sohn, Christina Montoya, and a whole host of others. I could be up here forever. Thank you. They made all of this happen. So, and also I really want to thank somebody who is no stranger to all of you, my right hand. He's moving on, he made captain. Lieutenant Mario Mota. Mario, where are you? Be recognized. Mario has really, there he is. He has helped me to connect with all of you so much. So right now, I'd like to share a special message with all of you. It's a video message from the President of the Board of Police Commissioners, Miss Eileen Decker. So please, I call your attention to our screen.
Hello, my name is Eileen Decker, and I'm the President of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. I'm sorry I'm not able to be with you there in person this evening, and I hope that next year this public health emergency is completely over and we can join together again to celebrate. But I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for participating in the Los Angeles Police Department's LGBTQ forum during Pride Month. Pride Month celebrates the historical movement and efforts to achieve equal justice and equal opportunities for the LGBTQ community. Over the years, millions of Americans mobilized their communities to resist discrimination, mistreatment, and harassment, and have been successful in changing the laws and practices aimed at or that worked against the LGBTQ community. The Los Angeles Police Department has invested a lot of effort into transforming policing by focusing its efforts in repairing relationships with communities and in ensuring the safety of the city's LGBTQ residents. Collaboration and engagement with our communities is imperative for building safe, healthy, and vibrant communities. The Police Commission is thankful to all of you for your efforts and supporting the department and in combating the recent wave of hate crimes that have cast a very long shadow on Los Angeles. We'd also like to acknowledge the department's continuous efforts to hire personnel that represent the true diversity of Los Angeles. LGBTQ visibility is important in moving forward, altering the culture of the department, and in establishing a work environment that is professional and respectful to everyone. So on behalf of the Board of Los Angeles Police Commissioners, I'd like to thank you all for working with us in this effort to continue moving towards a common goal of inclusion and respect. Thank you for working with us to strengthen the collaboration with all of our communities. And especially thank you for joining us in recognizing Pride Month. Please have a safe, happy, and very healthy Pride Month. Thank you.
And I know that President Decker represents all of the police commissioners and the warmth they're extending to each and every one of you today. So we thank her for her special message today. So partnerships and collaboration are where it's at. We all know that many great initiatives can fall flat or become hollow without the right people in the right places. And they have to be people who care from their heart and don't just talk the talk, but actually manifest and bring us together so that things can actually happen. And happening things in this city come about each and every day and cause us to come together tighter in bonds of strength and unity. We have another special guest here today, and I'm glad he could find time in his busy schedule to share a few moments with us. And it's my pleasure to introduce City Attorney Mike Feuer.
Bea, thank you so much. And you know, I got here just a few minutes late, so I don't know if Chief Moore had a chance to speak yet.
I'll follow you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it's going to be an easy thing for you to do, I think, at that point. But I was going to say, with not a hard act to follow today, Mike, but with Chief Moore as well as Chief Girmala, LAPD has the most, I think, enlightened and visionary leadership that it can have, and so we should all be very grateful to you.
Thank you. That's great.
Now, you know, our office in the City Attorney's Office has long history with the LGBTQ communities of our city. And my personal record in public service has been focused for decades on not just some sloganeering about equality, but about making it come true. We're on the city council or in the state legislature or now as city attorney. And give you a sense of what I mean by that, because I don't want to talk in empty platitudes today. I'm talking about real life. So when marriage equality was on the line of the U.S. Supreme Court, our office authored the brief on behalf of 226 cities and counties across the United States, the Conference of Mayors, these huge organizations standing up for marriage equality. When discrimination issues were in the Supreme Court, our office again took the leading role in drafting those documents for the whole country. And then here, locally, we've been in the forefront, as you know, when it comes to issues that bring LAPD together with us, together with you. And there's going to be a lot of discussion tonight, I'm sure, about issues of hate that are so pervasive now in our society and target so many different groups. But our office, again, in partnership with LAPD, came together and we prosecute hate crimes cases, including cases that target members of the LGBTQ community of our city. And I want to send a very strong message today. Unfortunately, it's a message I have had to state in other contexts with other communities as well. And that is, those of you who are here need to be emissaries in assuring that when there is an incident of hate, it is reported. That does not mean that every act of hate is a crime. We know that. But it's also true that if you don't report the incidents, then we don't have enough information on which to build a potential case. Let us work with you to figure out whether there's something that is actionable, because all of us are diminished in our city whenever there is any act of hate perpetrated against any of us based on who they are, because that is not who our city can be. We could be so much better than that. It was really important for me to be here tonight. It is a hectic time, there's no question about it. Both to express the teamwork that we feel in our office at LAPD, but also with the community here. And I know that the pandemic has made this an unusual gathering. First, the first time I've been invited to the penthouse is today. And that it kind of hurts that it took this long, but okay. But secondly, because we really need to have an event on a bigger scale, involving more people in communities throughout our city. That's what LAPD has been famous for doing, that kind of outreach. That's what we have been making a hallmark of our work. And so let's pledge that this is on the verge of the end of the pandemic meeting today, but it's the beginning of a new round of especially urgent and intensive efforts moving forward. Okay? Is that fair? So for tonight, I want to again express my appreciation to our teammates here and to you. We know each other very well, and I look forward to the day when this discussion is just limited to one thing. We say, Happy Pride, because we've transcended all the things that lead us to have a more serious conversation today. Tonight, Happy Pride.
So before I introduce our next speaker, I just want to talk about two initiatives that he brought forward very recently, so you can understand what leadership really means in a tangible way in a department that always didn't see it that way. As you know, we are building as a working group a timeline so LAPD can also own the dark side of history. And yes, there were many dark sides to history over the years. And we know that as we have an up and coming and a younger workforce coming through our ranks with each and every year, it's very important that they understand that the LAPD they see today was not always the LAPD of yesterday. And when we can honestly own those warts, when we can honestly own the hurt, then we can say that we have made some milestones. But if we decide to brush it away or make some flowery gesture that covers up the scars, the slings, and the arrows of the past and pretend they didn't happen, we are disingenuous, and we can never begin to build true bonds of trust. So recently, the chief of police did a couple very innovative things. Innovative not only for the city of Los Angeles, but for nationwide policing, and where law enforcement agencies across the nation and across the world look to say, where do we go next? And one of those was to establish on the Los Angeles Police Department at a staff officer rank a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. Something very important to deal with issues internally and externally to this police department, and own them and move forward in a positive and productive manner. And that person is an esteemed colleague of all of ours here today, and that is Commander Ruby Flores. Ruby, would you like to say a few words? Come on up. Ruby, please, I don't think you're mic'd up, but please. I'm not. Can you go ahead. Here's a mic. Here's a microphone. You can use the mic. This is a heck of a mic.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Gosh, what an introduction. You know, that really does make me extremely proud to hear it in that context, Chief. And it is really a sacred position that I do hold and do so with passion. And especially with those of you here that know me, when I first met you 5-6 years ago doing this working group, it was new territory, and it was difficult conversations that we've had. So I have to say that we have come a long way, even in the last decade, but there is still a lot more that we need to do and uncover. And thankfully, our chief of police has understood that when we look under the rug, there might be some things that we don't like, and it's going to be difficult for all of us. But we move forward with your trust and your guidance. I am so proud to work with this group. Number one, with the guidance and the support of our staff officers as well. It's been said that people that have a tremendous amount of skills and strengths often are those that are tasked with the most, and those that have to give the most. And this group here is certainly has lived up to that calling, because it has been a group effort, not only one-sided with the community and with our officers. So we move forward together, and I look forward to continuing that effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. And the second initiative I'd like to discuss is what I have right here on the left side of my jacket. And it is the first official LAPD LGBTQ Pride pin. This was created with the input and the final approval of the working group and the chief of police. And what warmed the hearts of all of us here today, who are walking around and standing and representing the department, is we ordered about 500 to 600 of these pins, thinking we'd give each division some pins and people would wear them. And then within 24 hours, our phone was ringing off the hook with people saying, "Where's our pin?" And we had to actually order a couple thousand more. And that tells you when people wear this pin, that they're not just wearing a token, they're wearing an expression of how they feel, but more importantly, how they lead. And that's where it's at. And I just wanted to share that. And all of this came under the leadership of our next speaker, our Chief of Police, Michael Moore.
Thank you, Pete. And good evening, everyone. Doesn't it feel good to be able to stand here and talk with each other and not have to worry about a background and what it's actually doing, or the cat running across your PC? I'm not a cat person, but just I've seen some Zoom calls. But and I want to thank Channel 35 for making also the extension of this available to every Angelino, both now and if they want to see it later. So let's give them a hand. Thank you. City Attorney Feuer, thank you for being here today, for your remarks, for the partnership. The public safety is, I talk about it often as a shared responsibility, and in city government, certainly the city attorney for all matters of city governance, but also, and importantly, the criminal prosecution of those that would prey upon others, that would victimize others. It's a critical partnership, and one that we hold very, very important to us and very dear. And your work with us is every day just proves again that we can together make it for a safer Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Please give him a hand for being here, if you would. Now, Chief Girmala kind of stole my thunder by thanking Julie and Christina and just going around through all the people who actually pulled this together. But for everyone who pulled this together, thank you. They've been working on this for a long time. I can tell you, well over a week. City Attorney Feuer talked about never being invited. He'll call it the penthouse. I think it's a veranda or something. I don't know exactly what it was, or it is exactly, but it took them literally 2 weeks just to clean up the bugs and the various other things to make this a relatively safe encounter. But what we're blessed is because just as Dodger Stadium had their reopening last night, this is an opportunity for us to have a reopening of our in-person engagement, of our seeing each other and hearing each other. And I couldn't be prouder than in Pride Month for the LGBTQ Chiefs Forum to be the first such of an engagement. So thank you. As Chief Girmala indicated, a week ago Tuesday, just a week ago yesterday, I guess it is, we had a presentation for Pride Month before our Board of Police Commissioners. And I will say that as I was on the Zoom call and watched the presentation, how impressed I was. And I hope that each of the working group members heard clearly from the Board of Police Commissioners. They hear from many, many people. But what was most critical to them was that your voice was not just a department, it wasn't an echo, but it was an authority. And it was an authority on the interests of the LGBTQ community. And it wasn't one that was just, again, patting the department on the back, but it was one of your investment and your advocacy for the rights and the inclusion for every community of Los Angeles, because it does extend beyond the LGBTQ community. And why I'm proud of you as a working group, some 50 members of you, and more than 5+ years of really digging in and working on this. And if you look at the things that you've accomplished over that time, whether it's the competency of the training, the 4-hour training that's now a statewide post-approved training, whether it's the employee handbook for transgenders and the community members that are employees of our organization, of how to work on inclusion, how to ensure the workplace is welcoming and is going to allow them to feel like they have as much of a voice as they do and they must have as anyone else in that workplace, whether it's a safe place for people who are being targeted for hate, for instances of hate, and your development of that program, again, modeled after Seattle, but strengthened here in Los Angeles as only Angelinos do, which is take it to the next level. Each of those engagements, I'm proud of your work you do. And that series of discussions gave voice to those causes, but also spoke about the work that's not yet done. And it wasn't just though it's important, the critical aspect of hate that we're seeing today, and how this pandemic has been weaponized, how the issues of identity have been used as rocks to throw against each other and to cause divisiveness and to polarize us as a country, and your work through that. And City Attorney Feuer, Mike is absolutely right. We have to be given a voice to every instance of hate. And you're never an annoyance to call and to alert and bring it to our attention. This country has gotten too far away from civility on every level. And that has given voice and authority to those who now feel they can come from their grandmother's basement and somehow they're now authorized to express their hate and this evilness. So thank you for talking about those matters. And then moving forward, I just want to, before we get into questions and answers, talk about as we pursue the instances of hate, our focus with our people is the area of instances and not hate crimes. So as you talk with community members and members within your community that express a frustration, or that they work with an officer who's expressing a hesitancy, or some even dismissing or discouraging you because it's an incident, nothing is going to happen, that I want you to know that that's a focus of us as well. That we sensitize and continue to sensitize our personnel that a person who has experienced an instance of hate, regardless of their identity, is deserving of not just respect, but of the full service and the full attention of this organization. Everything that we can do to hold the line and ensure that people understand that that we will do everything within our power to insist upon civility and the allowance of inclusion and acceptance within our community. But we know we have work to do there with us. But don't be discouraged if you hear of instances where we fell short. What I ask you to do is to call us, to invest in us. We're an organization of nearly 13,000. And we're made up of the very communities in which we all work and live and enjoy. And that means it's an imperfect community, but one we're committed to ensuring that our organization stands for the values of this organization and our mission, and we live through it with our action and our deed. Two other matters that are important going forward and for the working group. One is the historical timeline. When we talk about the historical timeline, I'm wearing a lapel pin today. I'm proud of it. I'm wearing a lapel pin that Chief Davis would have great exception to. God rest his soul. But during a time, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, to walk in the Pride Parade, you couldn't do it in uniform on or off duty. So we have moved tremendously. People I'll hear from time to time, nothing's changed, same old, and that is meant to ensure that we keep pushing. And I understand that insistence that you're never good enough, you're always working. But I reflect back on our history, and while it's got some dark and some ghosts, as Chief Beck would say, it also has growth, and it has the movement of time. But when we write of our history, and we're going to brag about this pin because of how inclusive we are and we're sensitive to this today, we got to own the fact, and our history's got to state the fact, that when the Black Cat occurred in 1968, of what the actions of LA police were for two men kissing. And what happened with sex workers and instances of condoms, and what multiple condoms in a package meant as probable cause to arrest, or supported in some view that would be the case. Leadership from the city attorney office then and others that said, no, we have to change that mindset. Not that we're legalizing sex work, but at the same time, we're not going to criminalize people who are trying to save their life and save and maintain some semblance of public health. So that reform over time is a bumpy road. And the road doesn't end here, it continues. It'll continue for the next generation. And by the way, I'm so proud of the men and women that we represent. Behind you represents a series of promotions and upgrades of assistant chiefs through captains that we have been able to make with the support of the mayor and the city council, long overdue. But look behind you, that's the next generation of LA Police. They represent this great organization and its values, and I couldn't be prouder of them. Let's give them a hand. But as they lead the generation, 36 officers that graduated from the academy last Friday, as they come into our communities, those young men and women do not know our history. And so this timeline that this working group is working on, and every community, every station across this city is working on, and every advocacy group we're asking for their participation, is to chrono our history. 150 years 2 years ago, and we're proud of it. We bragged about it. But now Commissioner Bonner, then as a new commissioner, said, but what about the things that weren't so shiny? It's like, well, we generally don't talk about your crazy uncle. Let's be clear. But we should. If we're going to avoid making those mistakes again, we've got to do that. And there's a quote by a guy named Timothy, and he's a former chief in Miami and former deputy commissioner with Bill Bratton. And his quote is that people who don't study history are bound to repeat it. And police never study history. And so for us, the historical timeline is about us studying history and enlightening the next organization or the next generation and the one that follows. And I hope it's a continuing living timeline, but we need your help on it. And that means we got to sit down, we got to write it down, we got to argue about it, we got to come to terms with it, and we got to get it done. That's the last part on that. Second thing, about 2 years ago, I was thinking about today, we had a vicious assault in downtown LA at a tavern involving some transgender individuals who were discriminated against, and the actions of the security and the actions of the establishment were discriminatory and wrong. And we committed to doing outreach and engagement, and I'm proud of that fact that there was a meeting just last week or the week before to move that statement forward. But with the bids that are in the Business Improvement District in downtown Los Angeles, but also in the Hollywood area, those are the two areas that we saw the greatest need and most immediate need. And feedback I've received is that the Business Improvement Districts were eager for the information and anxious to go forward with training that's community informed. So coming back to the working group, is we'll have some more tasking for you, because it's a group that doesn't need to hear from Johnny Law, but needs to hear from the various advocates and identities within our communities that informs them as they go about and determine how they go and conduct their businesses and these establishments through in all of our communities. So your work there is important. So in closing, I'm a task person because, as Chief Girmala indicated, it's about what we do, and it's how we show that we mean what we say. And I couldn't be prouder of this group because you're delivering it, but while you're delivering it, those who have the greatest capabilities, Commander Flores, are asked to do the most. So you're up for it. God bless you all, and I look forward to your questions and comments tonight. Thank you. Thank you.
Before we begin with our Q&A and open discussion, just a shout out to somebody who really doesn't need an introduction, but one of the spearheaders of our training, both field training officer training, the 4-hour post-certified training, trained the trainer. She's trained members of our custody services division, communications division, and also brought training into our house, where we had employees, civilian and sworn, who said, we need some assistance. We need members of this community. We need training to deal with our own feelings toward our own family members, with our own children who may be coming out, who may be transitioning, who may have questions. Rather than we create another generation, 40% of homeless youth, probably more than that, LGBTQ youth. And where are they left? Their families turn their backs on them, their friends, and then we wonder why they're out there destitute, involved in sex work, looking for where the next meal is going to come from, vulnerable and exploited. So part of that piece of turning the tide there is starting in our own house. And Sergeant Jules Sohn, I just have to recognize you for everything that you have done. Jules, as you all know, promoted. She went to Harbor area where she continues her great work, but the celebration would not be complete if I didn't say, Jules, I'm indebted to you for what you taught me, but what you continue to do is your work resonates throughout this department, not only in this house, but in the 21 houses, in the jail system, in communications division, where sometimes our dispatchers did not know how to handle a call from a community member who was LGBTQ talking about a domestic violence incident or some other type of discriminatory practice in a hospitality industry location, for example. And were calls getting treated dismissively or without that lack of attention because there was a lack of education. And where there is a lack of education, there is a lack of empathy. Make no mistake about it. And that really causes our police department to be a lesser police department. And then, again, we are not true to our creed. We are not true to our core values. So, Jules, thank you so much, and thank you so much for being here. So of course, no LGBTQ forum could be complete if I didn't ask Officer Julie Noni to join us up here today before we pull some numbers, because I got a good vibe going here with what we're doing. and she's going to help share some of your questions for the chief by kind of announcing, reading them off, and that can kind of spread into a dialogue with all of us. So, Julie, could I ask you to please take the mic and start us off for the chief?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Actually, just to break this up a little bit, we do have a couple raffle prizes tonight. So, Chief, I'm going to ask you to grab one in there, and we'll get the name and see who won.
Michael Moore. Oh, no, that's somebody else. So is it just the name on the back?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is this Rodriguez? 415.
Is Rodriguez here? All right, we have a winner.
Winner.
All
There
right,
you go.
thank you. We're going to start off with our first question, and
All
we'll
right.
get to a couple more raffle prizes. We had a few emails that came in. I'm going to read off some of those, but I did want to just start off with anybody that was here this evening that had a specific question to start off with. Would anybody like to ask in the audience?
Don't be
Okay,
shy.
we'll go off.
All
We'll
right.
go off with the email first. Okay. One of the first questions. Sorry about the wind.
You're good.
In the case where a trans or other non-binary person is under arrest, it could be a nightmare ordeal for them to be locked up with other prisoners who might be antagonistic to them, such as MTF trans women being with cisgender men. How is that handled these days?
Okay, so this is an area that I want to thank and extend to Commissioner Rob Saltzman, former police commissioner Rob Saltzman. Back in 2012, I believe it was, 13, he and I worked together with then Sandy Jo MacArthur, assistant chief, in developing guidelines for the housing, for actually the intake, assessment, and housing for transgender individuals. And the establishment of the first dedicated housing unit in west of the Mississippi for transgender individuals. The protocols that go with that is that point of a person has physically arrested and they're going to be physically booked, so they're going to remain in our custody. There is a jail screening form, a series of questions that are asked that involve medical history, that involve whether suicidal risks, what their history of violence is, other aspects. And in that is included whether or not they fear for their safety and whether or not they, and we ask them to identify, and it's whether they do or do not is their choice, their identity. And so with that, it doesn't matter that they identify as a trans or non-binary in and of itself, but what happens is it alerts us to ensure that we provide for their safety and ensure they have safety. And there are established protocols that and training for the intake of each of these instances. And I think that the work, so that means, for instance, in Hollywood, that when we have arrests that occur, or in Rampart or in Devonshire, that individual may be transported, if they're going to be physically booked, to the facility here, to our downtown jail facility, because that's the location within Los Angeles. We have about 5 different jail facilities, but that's the only one that has that dedicated housing to ensure their safety, and also recognizing the emotional stress and trauma that comes from just the incarceration itself and the risks that are posed to them.
Julie, I just want to recognize Mother Karina again for the work and spearheading those efforts that the chief talked about. Do you want to say anything, Karina, about that?
What would you add to that?
Please?
Yeah, about the policy. It's been we sure had a really good working group at that time that dealt with the problem. We have it at Metropolitan Station where we house transgenders to a safe place for them with the general population, and also one in Van Nuys that we worked on, and all the policies that we deal with was work with the working group that we had chaired. Yes.
Thank you, Mother Karina. And one last thing, we are still working currently, because the work is never done, as we said at the beginning of our meeting. And we're looking at all of the forms, intake forms, medical forms, that do need to be completed by officers together with that community member who sadly may find themselves within that situation, to ensure that they're not archaic, that they include the proper looking at pronouns. How are people being treated from the minute they become in our care and custody throughout the process? And the working group, when we meet again, I'm hoping it'll be next month, we will again be reviewing all of those intake forms to ensure that they are completed and they are part of a process that, regardless of the incident, that person is treated with dignity and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Here's the next question that came in via email. The arrest and prosecution of sex workers seems like a waste of time and resources. Does the LAPD ever make recommendations of support to changing the law? Can enforcement of the laws regarding sex workers be made a low priority, or is it already?
So we do advocate for legislative reform on various matters. As an organization, we've advocated and will continue to advocate for diversion and for alternatives to incarceration when we feel like that type of interaction is better suited for the underlying offense rather than a criminal sanction or punishment. So this is where we see with the City Attorney's Office, there is, for instance, individuals arrested for prostitution and can have diversion and can reach, working through the City Attorney's Office, alternatives to a sentence or further prosecution. I will say that as to sex working here in California and here in Los Angeles, it is against the law, and it is that we live in a country of laws, and the department's view is that we are going to respond to community complaints regarding instances of commercialized sex trade in public spaces, and also in commercial engagements where it may not be on the street, but it is advertised and commercialized, and you have sex workers that are being victimized. What we see today in each of our bureaus, and our bureau chiefs are here today. Regina is, for instance, Deputy Chief Regina Scott from South Bureau has one of the most, thank you, give her a hand. Her new partner will soon be Commander Lou Pagliaga. Tags. But in South Bureau and in Valley Bureau, they have dedicated human trafficking task forces. And they work with the city attorney and the district attorney, but also advocacy groups to rescue sex workers. We recognize that, as was referenced, that 40% of runaways are, we believe, or more, are part of the LGBTQ community as youth. We also know that the foster system is the primary feeding ground, and it's disgusting, but it's the primary feeding ground where those young people are victimized and brought into a sex trade and commercialized for the simple greed of another human being. So we look at prostitution today much from the lens, when possible, of it being a survivor. And how do we transition that survivor out of that lifestyle and into an alternative? And we recognize, lastly, that people involved in the sex worker trade are many times doing that as a last resort, as an absence of other options. And so working with the community advocates, it's our desire of how do we transition this person from this very dangerous and it's just a very dangerous lifestyle and profession into something that's going to allow them to escape that turmoil of risk and danger to their own health and safety, as well as recognizing that in the United States, this I believe will remain a matter of not commercializing and accepting it. I recognize Canada, Europe, other parts of the world, but I also recognize and will say in defense of our laws here that we also see organized crime, transnational gangs that have capitalized on those allowances and have occupied that space with providing sex workers through human trafficking.
Julie, I'd just like to add as well, and we all know and can testify here, the lack of employment opportunities, especially to our trans community, and the discrimination at point of employment that they face. I know, Beverly, you and I have talked about that. James as well, I know, as you talk about housing discrimination and employment discrimination. So oftentimes the options are limited because the environment also limits them as well. And the difficulty for trans men and women both, especially trans women of color, to find their way through to career opportunities, despite the fact that they may be multi-talented, extremely educated, but still face those ugly walls of discrimination. So one of the things as we move forward with the working group is looking at how can we be advocates, working with Trans Can Work, for example. We have a job fair coming up, and Mother Karina, thank you so much as well for helping to get us involved in it. But we can't be shy and pretend and say, okay, well, we don't like this, and this is bothersome to us, but what are we really saying and doing about opening the door of opportunity? And how are we as a community, if we're a caring community, despite whatever our occupations are, opening that door? And that's why the LAPD too, and we have folks from our recruitment who are here today, we are recruiting. And we cannot close the door to anyone within the city of Los Angeles who has the qualifications, nor should any employer, so that trans men and women, members of the LGBTQ community, can get the smile, the handshake, and then get the rejection from employers, not only here in the city of Los Angeles, state of California, but the nation and beyond.
I think and I'd follow that lastly, with the aftermath of George Floyd's death and the reckoning, if you will, the social injustices and the inequities that we saw, the mayor, under his leadership and direction, established Capri Maddox's position of civil rights and equity and inclusion. And her work, her office's work, is oftentimes in housing and employment, where many people look at inequities in our society and you see policing front and center. And yet we know the inequities are in every other, so many other fields that police and fire, certainly police, end up being the last stop, or we end up dealing with the symptom, but not the underlying influences and causes that create the symptom. So the issue of lack of employment opportunities, the issue of employment discrimination, the issues of housing discrimination. Her office is charged, and you're welcome to, if you'd like, Fernando, to talk about this.
I think
you covered it?
Chief, yeah.
So for the working group, I would suggest it's a great office to talk to and to bring and identify instances where you see those shortfalls. Because just as we see discrimination in the finances and other parts of our economy and our society, that office is, I think it's new, if you will, to civic government at a municipal level. I think it's very thoughtful about it, but also what really matters is it needs to move on some of these issues, and that's the gap of like hate instances. Is it's happening, but we're not hearing about it. So it's as if it doesn't exist, but yet we know that it does. So again, a tasking working group is to work with some of our advocacy groups to bring some examples or instances for help.
Thank you, Chief. And partially this answer I think was already answered, but according to the LA LGBT Center, a disproportionate number of homeless youth, more than about 40%, are LGBTQ. Some even engage in survival sex work. This person on this email was saying it brought them to tears to hear that one such youth traded a McDonald's meal for a sexual favor. How does the LAPD handle homeless youth cases?
So, and thank you. I think this was somewhat answered, I believe, but I'll go back through this. Our human trafficking task forces, our investigation of prostitution or sex trade work is geared toward rescues of such individuals. It's to build trust with them as individuals and to find a transition away from a criminal prosecution and into a rescue. And I'm proud of the work of that. We're a leader in this area. and it has overcome. We've had to overcome stereotypes and prejudices, if you will, of a person who is involved in this is committing a crime. The underlying reasons of why they got there or how they got there is not a police matter. That's the Jack Webb, if you will, just the facts, dragnet mentality of 50 or 60 years ago. Today, we do have a responsibility to understand some of those underlying matters and how can we help inform alternatives that reach the same outcome, which is this person is rescued and moved from that terrible spiral, and the community safety and community satisfaction is improved.
This wind, let me tell you.
Yes.
Okay, this is actually regarding a recent Facebook post that is a public post that is put on the LAPD HQ Facebook. There was someone there that had commented and said that they made some derogatory remarks, stating that LAPD support for the LGBT community and the pride pins LAPD are wearing. They made some derogatory statements saying that the most LAPD would do is probably spit on people in the community. And they wouldn't give them the time of day or support. For people who are judgmental and lead with hate and are not aware of police support, what would you say to the citizens of LA to lessen any fear or awareness about police involvement with the LGBTQ community over the last few decades?
Well, I'm a hope brings eternal. And I recognize that we had failures, we've fallen short in the past, but I also look back at that past and say that the DNA of this organization is quality through continuous improvement. As we look at policing across America, 17,000 agencies, 750,000 men and women, all walks of life and backgrounds, I'm proud of the fact that we lead from the front. And we own it, we fall short. Saying we're sorry is important, coming to understand that we have failed and we have fallen short, and that we may in the future as well, but that we're committed to living up to our core values and to serve each individual with dignity and respect, and to protect them and to ensure that they're treated fairly. And haters going to be haters. There's some people out there that I can say that to, and I can point out our efforts, and our men and women can. We can demonstrate sacrifice. But I listened to an earlier conversation today on public safety, and Commissioner Bonner made a very insightful remark and reminded us all. People who have some of these beliefs and emotions, the last thing they want to hear is facts, and they're just not going to listen to facts, and you're not going to win them over by facts. So showing good deeds and representing the sacrifice and the good work every day. But we're committed to doing that, and we live a life of service. This is a profession that we recognize that a person who follows me or comes behind me, I as a police officer, we carry the burden of did they treat someone fair and right, or did they abuse their discretion or abuse their power? We own a little bit of that. Doesn't mean we have to wallow in it, but we have to recognize it, and then as we go forward, show a commitment with accountability, with training, with development, with selection and deselection, that we refine our work so that we can try to make those individuals who don't believe us, who think this is just just like a top coat, it's not genuine, that we can downsize those as much as we can. Right now we're in an era of policing where there's a lot of voice being given to that, a lot of volume, because there's a lot of unhappy people. A lot of people that are going through a pandemic and seeing injustices, and we are the most visible form of government, and we certainly, as a profession, have much history to which to reference and throw and weights onto us. If you want to sink this idea, we give you lots of ammunition to do that. So as a police department, though, we've got to believe, and I believe in our men and women and our people, that they come to work every day with the desire to help people and to serve. And I see the vast majority of instances, and that's why in my heart, I still believe in them, and I still have this belief that this organization is worthy of that respect. It's worthy of that bit of trust that we're going to continue to work on every single day. And I just ask you for that.
Julie, I'd just like to add, I think one of the biggest changes I've seen in the department over the years, but it took a long time for the department to realize it, is that all of the answers and all of the positive direction and all of the initiatives don't need to come with LAPD thinking they have all the answers. Part of the most important changes, the most important initiatives came either from a collaboration with the community and us opening ourselves up to the community, or having the community come to us and basically tell us, hey, in these specific areas, these are the things of concern, and these are the things that need to be changed. We don't have all the answers yet. For a long, long time, we told people what the answers were. And there was very little listening. There was a lot of speaking. There was a lot of posturing. There was a lot of egos. And there was a lot of weight shifting. Yet there was not a lot of inclusion. There may have been lip service to inclusion, but not inclusion where you really pulled up a chair at that conference table, sat across from a chief of police or one of his representatives and said, hey, we need to tell you what we think needs to be changed, needs to be modified, or where you need your eyes opened. And that took a long time. And when I joined in 1985, that wasn't always the case. We kind of were the ones who, we were ashamed to say we didn't have the answers. We were ashamed to say that we didn't have all the boxes checked because we were the LAPD. And we knew the way it is. We knew what time it was. And, you know, really nothing to hear or see here. But that has changed, and I think it's made us a greater, a better, a stronger department, and it didn't diminish our leadership. It didn't delineate anything that was negative, that we could say that we were weaker because we included the community. On the contrary, that's where the trust and the lines of trust get built. If we don't crack open that door, if there isn't a little way that people can say, okay, we see some light, now that door will open, they're not going to believe they really have a voice if we're not lending them that time and that power to that voice. And I think that you have all represented that here. Troy, I hear you back there, my brother.
Troy, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, B for mayor. B for mayor. We've had enough of this nonsense.
Thank you, Troy.
Is it time for a raffle?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to ask Maggie. Maggie, come up here and you pull this ticket. Let's hear it from Maggie Dillard. Maggie was out here for 2 days setting things up. There you go. Okay. And you should have seen her. She got all look at great shoes, come on, and all that. But outside, she was there in her jeans, sweating it up, getting this prepared today. So Maggie, you read it. You go, girl. Come on.
Bermudas, Wendy, Lindy.
Yay!
Kind of hard to read. Those are some tiny little letters. Congratulations.
One more, Chief.
One more. Jules, come on up and make the draw, Jules.
Get them all.
And while we're drawing, I failed to recognize a cherished colleague of all of ours who leads our Office of Constitutional Policing and Policy, Ms. Liz Rhodes. Liz, thank you. So when the working group, when you work on policy change, when you're trying to move the needle, especially on extremely important issues, Liz is our partner. Liz just is too humble to come up here and do anything, so Liz is going to hide there looking pretty in her great jacket. And she is a fashionista, for those of you who have not already seen that, but she is smarter than 99% of the population. So Liz, thank you for being here.
So our next raffle winner is Paul Hutchinson.
Hey.
Great, congratulations. Jules, back to you. I think that was the last of the question.
One last question.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Paul?
So Chief, in light of the conversation that you had, we know that we have the mental illness and they were dumped out on the streets. and that the men and women in blue are the front line and the visible ones who get bullied and bad-mouthed and all the faults. But the services come from the county. So how do you deal with the county and the bureaucracy and their arrogance and their obstinance when you have needs of the people that you are trying to
Right.
serve?
So first, I don't talk to Dr. Sharon about their arrogance or their obstinance. I say, good afternoon, how are you, sir? How can we help this population amongst us? Mental health in this country is terrible. We ought to be ashamed as Americans. And it's not just LA County. It's not just 58 counties in the state of California. It's 50 states in this great country. In my view, there's no greater country in the world, but it is embarrassing to see the state of mental health. And yet with that, you just can't throw it. You just can't say, well, then that's the way we are. So I think first of all, law enforcement is for too long been asked to do too much. And in the mental health arena, it is because the absence of any other alternative. There is no 811, right? There's an initiative right now to make 811 an actual emergency line for suicidal individuals. Why? In part, to get to a mental health professional instead of a police or fire resource. But the shame of it is that we don't have mental health professionals working 24/7. They don't work nights, they don't work weekends, they don't work on holidays. As a profession, we have allowed them to, as a profession, to culturally work from an office and to work in a clinical setting. And outreach and engagement, if they're involved in their clinical workers, we pay them terribly. And yet they're in the harshest conditions and the most uncertain existence. And as a society, we've got to get smart about that. If we really want to change this, the reasons this last year, Reimagining Public Safety, is to take mental health calls off of our agenda, right? Off of our queue. LAPD, there's not a law enforcement officer in this country that would argue with that. Please, we should not handle this any more than we should handle putting out a fire in that building right there. But what do? Well, an LAPD, or for police officers for that matter, if it's a fire or a mental health worker, if nobody's around, we go running at it, because that's what cops do. And for too long, our society has overplayed that willingness. So today, our efforts are to say no. We are now diverting calls to Dee Hirsch for suicide prevention. We are working to get 5 therapeutic vans with a DMH worker and a clinician and a driver. None of them are LAPD or LA Fire, to do outreach and engagement. The mayor's new budget supports millions of dollars in a circle. But someone tell me, community response model, I think is what it's, something like that. But it's essentially that it's going to be the 811 for minor disturbances involving mental health and conflict that don't require a police response. And they're going to respond 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The pilot is in Hollywood and Pacific, which has some of the highest numbers of homeless and people experiencing mental illness and substance abuse. And the idea is that they'll stay there in the absence of radio calls to do outreach engagement with hotspots, to learn and develop a clientele so that we can build 19, 20, 25 encounters to get that person to take the leap of faith and actually get into treatment and actually begin a recovery process. So my frustration and our frustration as a department and as a profession is we're not moving fast enough. Policing gets it. We're doing things that we shouldn't be doing, but there's no one else there, and the public, 4 million people, keep calling that center right over there and keep asking and demanding that someone respond. And so if we can't hand it off because we don't have another public agency to handle it, we end up feeling some moral obligation that we have to. And that's got to change. And I believe that this is a city that can lead. It already is by talking and identifying initiatives, but we got to build up the volume and the capacity, because these are tens of thousands of calls.
But why wouldn't EMS though? They're the ones who are probably better equipped to deal with someone who's having a bipolar episode.
Because, right, so good question. The next problem that you have, and Dr. Sharon will say this, is it's not just the initial response. We have to build the capacity for 24, 72, 96-hour beds, and for 30-day beds. We don't have seating capacity for this 24 counseling and supportive services to get the person back on a recovery. That needs to extend to 96 hours, that needs to extend to 24 to 30 days, and we need to build that by the hundreds. And I'll give you a personal story. My daughter works out of state, and she's going to be a psychologist. And she's in her internship and going to graduate school, and she's working for a county which has 60 beds that are 30 and 30 in a dorm setting with a common area. And when you get booked into that county for a nonviolent offense, you're given an option of the door on the right to go into mental health or substance abuse treatment for a 90 to 180 day program. LA doesn't have that. A county of 10 million, a city of 4, and we don't have 60 beds for that. It's absurd. And because this is a little place that people would say is backwards, they're farther ahead than we are as a county. So we need to do a better job at that. My voice, our voice, everyone, these men and women wearing, our people of this organization wearing these badges, no one's standing in the way. People saying you're protecting your turf. No, believe me, we want you to have it because that will improve public safety. Okay? Yes?
I have a question based on public safety. Based on the incidents that have taken place at MacArthur's Park, not only towards the trans or the LGBT community and the homeless population and also the undocumented population that's out there. Specifically, I know there's all these gang members that are predatory, the most vulnerable ones, taxing them for protection, but protection from who? From them themselves. What are the measures that are being taken now, not only to protect the homeless, but also the undocumented population who are selling, there's like small vendors who are selling trinkets, etc., in order to earn a decent living, who are being taxed, and also who are being attacked by the gang members. So what are the measures that are being taken? And I believe the community wants to know and hear it from you.
So the first thing that we did when I'm proud of the work of Rampart Area and Central Bureau, and soon to be promoted Deputy Chief Labrada is on some well-deserved time off, so he's not here tonight. But the Rampart area identified and brought before the justice system those responsible for those assaults. And I personally spoke with DA Gascon about the necessity that I believe that those prosecutions warranted enhancements. And I believe that members of the LGBTQ community met with the DA, and he modified his position relative to enhancements because he heard the egregious nature of those. So first, it's ensuring justice for the victims of those attacks, and that means the full weight of the law. There's just this whole idea that we're going to take our foot off the throttle on this and the weight of justice because the individual who's the offender has had all this trauma and all this background. No, the trans community does not believe, in many instances, that law enforcement supports them or respects them or feels or recognizes them as on an equal footing as other people. And so if we in the criminal justice system don't pursue justice by using the laws that are at our disposal, it only goes to reinforce that further. So first, it's our open and loud advocacy that we ensure that we aggressively enforce with due process and constitutional policing, but we hold people accountable. Secondly, there's been outreach and engagement. Saw some people here that in the Midnight Stroll, a location that historically has been in the Hollywood area, that had outreach and engagement was this about 2 months ago on a Friday night to ensure the supportive services, that supplies, housing options, and other resources were made available to the trans community, specifically there in the MacArthur Park. Lastly, the outreach and engagement has not just been with those services, but it's been with boots on the ground, our people going on patrols and added emphasis against the gang members that have begun taxing those locations and trying to prey upon undocumented individuals, upon the trans population, but also others that are in that area. Lastly, it is also insisting that the council look at its work in regards to camping in the park and overnight camping in the park, that there's conditions that are being allowed to flourish there that are adding to our challenges of providing for the safety of everyone involved. That allowing some of these conditions to continue unaddressed is a feeding ground, because it gives harbor and shelters, but it also gives other individuals the opportunity to prey upon the population there. So it's an effort that continues to this day. It's not over with, but it does touch, and I'll say, when we talk about issues, for instance, of LGBTQ communities, just as we saw with the AAPI community, that what we learned from this working group and what we learned from the hate crimes and instances that you faced had applicability with the AAPI community. When we saw that the pandemic would have been weaponized in the increased instances of hate, those same strategies are applicable here in the sense of what happens with the homeless community, what happens with what we do with camping and cleanups and sanitation, have ripple effects. They have unintended consequences on other parts of public safety. And you just can't think, well, I'm just going to, this one thing, it's going to happen, but it won't harm the rest of the complex society that we have. We saw that lastly with shooting violence. Why is shooting violence going through the roof? Well, we've torn everything up in society in order to survive this pandemic. And it's torn apart institutions that in Los Angeles were the glue that was keeping us together and allowed us to achieve, historic lows in shooting violence. Still far too many, but 10 plus years of fewer than 300 homicides. And this last year was 355, and we have 229 additional shooting victims this year. That's a 58% increase from a year ago. And so why? It's because when we tear these things down or we diminish them or we lower them, we have to look for what the intended consequences are, but also what the unintended consequences. So what's happening there will not stand. We're not hiding it. We're not saying, well, this is just a one-time thing and minimizing it. If anything, we're going to bring the lights up fully, which is why we need to know about these instances. We need to know about the one-offs, the hateful remark, and not just the person that is so aggressive that they actually commit a crime. Because we know that this whole aspect of that level of heat is going to develop into crime because people just become increasingly emboldened.
All right. First of all, the department is humbled and grateful for everyone who took a chance on us and came here with good faith, with honor, with integrity to say the LAPD is moving in a direction that we believe is a direction that gives us some confidence, that gives us some solace. Although we all know, and we started this conversation here today saying much work needs to be done. But if you're able and willing and still dedicated, as I know you are, to doing that together with us, there's only one path forward, and it's ahead in a strong, a positive, and inclusive direction. So we thank all of you for that. To those joining on Channel 35, we wish and hope that this time next year you can celebrate Pride Month here with us or in an even bigger venue so that we can meet each other face to face. To the colleagues here in blue, thank you so much to those established leaders and those who have so much more to give. You've seen the best of our community right here before you today. I hope you had the chance to meet, to greet, exchange names and numbers, and hope as you take your commands out there, you meet again. And you can bring great work and great direction to the LAPD that we know and the LAPD that we love. And share that with those who work with you and for you as well. So as we conclude tonight, thank you so much. Thank you for making LA a better place, and thank you for enriching this Los Angeles Police Department. Good night, everybody. Happy Pride.